Welcome to the True Demon Lord Show. I am, of course, the True Demon Lord Franco, and today we're going to be looking at Plague Legion. More specifically, I'm going to give you some tips on how to play Plague Legion, or just some advice on playing Plague Legion in general. So, of course, Plague Legion was one of the 4 detachments we gained in the Grotmas Advent Calendar back in December, and it is, of course, our Nurgle-focused detachment. So, naturally a tougher detachment, which very much focuses on hindering down your opponents while kind of just controlling the state of the game as much as it can. So before we do get into the rest of this video, if you do like what we do here on the channel, please consider leaving a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Helps the channel out massively and helps us grow, allowing us to reach more demon players and help as many people as we can. In addition, if you live in the southeast of England, whether it be Kent, Essex, London, Surrey, Sussex, or you don't mind traveling a bit for some good events, then go check out Warzone events. They run great monthly 40k RTTs. They do run about 3 GTs a year, 2 to 3 GTs a year. They do also run events for many more games such as Sigma, Heresy, Middle Earth, Marvel's Crisis Protocol, Guild Ball, etc., etc. They run a few all on their website. They're on the cheaper end of events, but they're also very good terrain, very well run, and a very good venue to back it all up. So go check out Warzone events if you want to find and go to some pretty good events. So let's get into the video itself. Plague Legion. Plague Legion is personally my favorite detachment. It very much fits my play style. And if you're looking at getting into Plague Legion, then this could hopefully help you kind of broach that. Or if you are playing Plague Legion but maybe struggling, then hopefully some of this video will give you some advice or some tips that you can help apply in your games and hopefully get you through those issues you're kind of having. So when approaching Plague Legion or Plague Legion list, I think the first thing you have to decide is kind of how you're approaching the battle shock element. So, of course, the detachment rule for Plague Legion is all enemy units within 9 inches of any of your Nurgle units are treated as being within your army, Shadow, or Chaos. And then each command phase, yours and your opponent's, you pick one enemy unit within your army, Shadow, or Chaos, and it has to take a battle shock test. Now, of course, naturally that will be at -1, causing deep mortal wounds if the unit fails because of the effects of the Shadow itself. Now, like I said, there is kind of 2 ways to approach this. You can either go all in, like just kind of focus fully on it, or you can not so much go all in, but use it as an extra tool in your arsenal, which is kind of how I approach the Plague Legion itself. But both ways are viable. They definitely change the way you build your list, though. So if you're looking at going all in, then you're kind of building your entire list around that battle shock element and trying to cause as many debuffs as well as many battle shocks as you can to just force fails, right? So there's a couple units you can take that worsen the opponent's battle shock test. One is the Poxbringer, which is a character for Nurgle, which can attach to Plague Bearers. You can take up to 3 of them, like with any unnamed character. I do recommend, even if you're not leaning all into battle shocks, still take a couple Poxbringers. They're phenomenal. The -1 they give to battle shocks within 6 inches of them themselves is still really good, especially if you are actually focusing less on the battle shock element. So those 3 battle shocks you're putting out, you kind of want to be at a more negative anyway. So they're definitely phenomenal for that. They also give lethal hits on 5s, critical hits on 5s, and obviously Plague Bearers have lethal hits. So very good combination there. And them themselves are also a little bit of a beat stick character, 4 strength, 5 -2 damage attack. So they can actually put out a bit of work. So yeah, I think Boxspring is whether you're leaning fully into the battle shocks or using it more as an extra tool. They're still very viable to take either way. And then you can take Blue Horrors. Now, Blue Horrors, of course, being a Zinch unit, if you're a bit of a, you know, bit of a lore buff and you don't like messing with that element of it, then maybe not look at Blue Horrors, because adding a Zinch unit into a Nurgle detachment is quite blasphemous. But if you're looking to really maximize, the negative effects on battle stocks for your opponent, definitely recommend Blue Horrors. So obviously they infiltrate, so it allows them to get the board faster, which means they can hold units, hold just in the middle, do actions in the middle, have uses aside from just, affecting the opponent's battle shocks. But the reason you want to take them, or the reason you'll be adding them in, is because any enemy unit within 6 inches of a blue horror model, specifically a blue horror model, within a unit of blue horrors, and they reduce their leadership by 1 for their unit. So now an enemy unit within 6 inches of a unit of blue horrors in your Shadow of Chaos will be at -1 leadership, -1 battle shock. A unit within 6 inches of a unit of blue horrors and a Poxbringer will actually be at -1 leadership, -2 battle shock. So it's essentially a -3 on our battle shock test. And now you'll start to see even Marines failing leaderships, failing battle shocks fairly regularly. So definitely something to look into. Now, if you're looking at forcing more battle shocks, Demonettes are a very good option. Again, even if you're going on the other side of it and just maximizing from the few battle shots you are going to get rather than maximizing the amount of battle shots you're going to cause, I do still recommend Demonettes. Up until recently, I was running them in my list. I only dropped them to maximize the amount of Plague Bearers I'm taking, but Demonettes are a phenomenal unit to take, especially in this detachment. They move 9 inches, they are OC2, they have fights first, so any enemy units that want to come and charge onto an objective to try and take it, they'll get to hit first. Fights first is obviously very strong. And they've got a good amount of, dev wound -1 attacks, which is pretty decent. But their ability at the start of the fight phase, all enemy units within 6 inches of a unit of Demonette. Sorry, take that away. All enemy units within engagement range of a unit of Demonette have to take a battle shot test. The 6 inch bit comes from the Bile Piper, because I think these two guys, but the Demonettes and the Bile Piper unit combine very well. So the Bile Piper, of course, any non-vehicle, non-monster enemy units within 6 inches of him have to take a battle shot test at the start of the fight phase. Of course, he's going to have the Canker Blight on him. The Canker Blight enhancement is phenomenal and auto take for this detachment. And if you don't know what that is, basically each time an enemy unit within 6 inches of the bearer of the Canker Blight fails a battle shot test, instead of taking D3 mortal wounds from the Shadow of Chaos as normal, you can choose to activate the Canker Blight, as long as it's non-vehicle, non-monster. Um, and then they just lose a model in that unit of your opponent's choice. So against things like Terminators, Custodes, Tyranid Warriors, Blood Crushers, etc., etc., models with 2, probably 3, 4, 5 wounds apiece, they're very, very good. It's very, very good again. It will allow you to do multiple battle shots at the start of the fight phase. In addition, with the Canker Blight, means you can kind of pick up multiple models at the start of the fight phase, completely changing the complexion of the combat. For example, a few weeks ago, I played into Custodes. I charged in the Poxbringers unit, not the Poxbringers unit, sorry, the Bile Pipers unit with a unit of Demonettes into a unit of Wardens. This was the phase as well where they would proc their 4 up for no pain, so they were very tough. I also had a Poxbringer within 6 inches for the additional -1 battle shot. Paused 2 battle shots at the start of the fight phase, to which they were both failed, so 2 dead um, Wardens straight off the bat. And then I also used the Fever Vision strat for +1 to hit. More importantly, causing a battle shock after making the attacks with the Bile Pipers unit, and they would fail another one. So I'd pick up 3 Wardens just like that, and I would only end up doing like 5 or 6 wounds across the combat, and actually not doing. I think maybe taking 1 wound off one guy after 4 no pain. So the main damage came from those battle shocks. So they're very good either way, whether you want them to just help the Bile Piper, or just in general cause more battle shocks, or again just leaning into more battle shocks in general. And then Skull Cannons being a corn unit, quite a range unit as well. So that will actually give you a little bit of range damage. But why you're taking them is because after they finish shooting, you pick a unit they hit, and the unit has to take a battle shock test. So of course, again, if you have the Bile Piper nearby, maybe using Merc Shadows, giving his unit +5 movement, for his unit being 11-inch movement now, and being able to get within 6. So maybe having Demonettes nearby, you kind of spam 3 battle shocks from 3 Skull Cannons, and then charge in with the Bile Piper and the Demonettes, and then cause another 2, and then smacking them with Fever Visions to cause another battle shock. That's 6. Maybe you cause another one on them at the start during their command phase, where that would be 7. So that's a lot of battle shocks. So you've seen that kind of the extreme end of it, and that is the very extreme end of it. But if you're kind of leaning into this, I don't know if I would take 3 Skull Cannons, but I think 2 is a nice number. But the thing is, the more of Blue Horrors, Skull Cannons, Demonettes you're taking, it's taking away from the amount of Nurgle you're taking. So it's again changing the complexion of your list. But it's definitely a way to build it. Now, like I said, there is another way to go about it, and that's, you know, using the battle shots you can cause as more of tech pieces rather than the whole gimmick of what you're doing. But we will later in the video get onto where to allocate and how to kind of go about battle shocks in general. So we'll cover all that in a bit. So we're going to talk about movement and deployment. Of course, if you know this game, you know that the movement phase is the most important phase of the entire game, and it can lose you games by mismoving. Deployment, if you deploy badly, if you misdeploy, again, it can cause you to lose or have an uphill battle at least. So I feel like this is going to be important for pretty much everyone. But I have found, as someone whose favorite phase of the game is movement, the movement phase, and my favorite thing to do in the game is movement interactions, not so much the damage element of anything. I found out very fast that it is very important in this detachment, very important, and because naturally you're a lot slower than pretty much all the other demons. Your average move is between 5 and 7. Plague Bearers moving 5, Ground Cleaners moving 7. Of course, you've got Plague Drones who move 10. You've got Murk Shadows, which allow you to add 5 inches to a Plague Bearer normal move, but average movement between 5 and 7, really. So yeah, you need to make sure you're maximizing every bit of movement you're doing and your deployment itself. So your deployment needs to be on point. Quite frankly, you need to be able to make sure you're deploying all your units in positions where they're going to be able to move, kind of planning forward. If I deploy this unit here, can they get to this position? Like when you're putting down your bar pipe with the Canker Blight, you kind of want to react to where your opponent is putting the most important of their infantry units, or not even just infantry units, but non-vehicle, non-monster units. Maybe if they're going to have things in reserve, you're going to think, okay, where would they probably want them to come down? And that's kind of where you want to set them up. Same with your ground clean ones, your monsters. You want to make sure you're putting them in positions where they're not going to get stuck with terrain. They're not going to get stuck behind too many of your other models. They can actually get to points they need to be. You need to make sure as well when you are moving that you are staging units for the future turns. So if a Plague Bearer unit obviously can't get to an objective, you still want to be moving it using either the Droning Shroud enhancement to protect them. So the Droning Shroud enhancement is given to one of your Nurgle monsters, and it works exactly like Be'lakor's Rift and Shades aura. So all your Nurgle units within 6 inches of the Droning Shroud can only be targeted by range attacks if the attacking model is within 18 inches. Now, you can do a couple things with this. You can allow your units to be not quite hidden, but be in a position within 6 inches of the Droning Shroud that they're not going to get targeted because your opponent just can't get to shoot them. Or if they can shoot them, you're using it as a bait. So you're putting them in a position where units are going to have to come out to a certain point to shoot them, but now they're basically free to be jumped on by your other units as well. You need to remember to be protecting your auras for shadows and debuffs. So your Poxbringers, you want them when you're moving them, when you're charging in and using the charge phase pile-ins and consolidations. You want to be making sure your Poxbringer is being moved in the positions where he can project that 6-inch -1 battle shock aura. And same with Blue Horrors. If you're taking them, you want to make sure you've got them in positions where they're projecting their aura. Early game, you want to make sure you're taking units like Nurglings because they're good for projecting, the shadow aura out early. So you want to make sure that you're always moving in positions where your opponent's going to be or where your opponent currently is. So you want to try and minimize the command phases where you're not causing battle shocks because you're just losing value off your battle shocks straight away for everyone you're missing. You definitely want to be planning for heroic interventions and rapid ingress spots. Very important in this detachment. Being able to, have a unit of Plague Bearers get charged and then have another unit of Plague Bearers support them is the difference between either losing an entire unit because you can use other models from the other Plague Bearer units heroics to tag up models that are not in base or base contact with any of your Plague Bearer models, or base contact of a unit of a model that is in base contact of a Plague Bearer model. So essentially stopping stopping models from being able to fight. Splitting the attacks means they're less likely to wipe a whole unit of Plague Bearers. This also allows you to get more OT on the objective because, again, the primary, I feel like, is the biggest point of this detachment. You're going to be wanting to slam primary as hard as you can and then let the secondaries kind of take care of themselves when and where. Same with Rapid Ingress. I feel like Rapid Ingress is a very important strat for demons in general. Rapid Ingress being the core stratagem that lets you deep striker unit or bring a unit in from reserves in your opponent's movement at the end of your opponent's movement phase. Of course, in our case, deep strike because everything has deep strike. I love doing this on Rotigus. Pretty much Rotigus always starts in reserves unless I'm against an army that I know is going to run at me turn one. Maybe World Eaters, maybe an army full of advanced and charging speedy units. In which case I will start him on the board because he's a good combat piece to have. Also being able to project that -1 damage out straight away is better than not having him come down till turn two, my turn two, or having the rapid ingress in my opponent's turn two, etc., etc. So rapid ingress is nice. Also, it keeps your opponent thinking. It means they're gonna overthink about not letting gaps for him to drop in behind, potentially stretching and keeping more important units behind. Also, lets you bring him reactively to deal with situations. For example, if your opponent's about to charge onto an objective, if you're able to get him to drop down to touch that objective, that now gives out your 6-inch aura of -1 OC. So now your opponent's less likely to take it. Also putting him in a position to heroically intervene. It might even put your opponent completely off charging in that direction. So yeah, very important. You want to make sure as well you are keeping key units in buff ranges like Droning Shroud for the no shoot, Font of Spores for +1 AP, and +1 toughness all from the Ground Demons from the Demon Lord of Nurgle. I personally feel the play bearers are the bread and butter of your detachment, and you're wanting 30, 40, 50 of them. That is just my personal playstyle and opinion. And when doing that, you want to make sure they are getting the maximum amount of value from Droning Shroud. So if your opponent's going to shoot them, they have to come close, meaning you can jump on them with other units you've staged up further. And the +1 toughness aura, which is incredibly important. Making play bearers T6 is such a good breakpoint into a lot of things. Strength 5 hates it, Strength 10 hates it, Strength 6 hates it. So very good to have. Strength 11 as well. And then remember to be careful with your small characters like your Bile Piper, like Poxbringers, maybe Epidemius, because smart opponents will utilize precision as a strat for the epic challenge core stratagem. So with precision, the character attacking has to have line of sight to the enemy character. So being able to keep units behind terrain is pretty good because that means it's going to be harder for your opponent to snipe them out. But also I'm remembering that they can still project their aura. So you only really want to keep them in those like hidden spots if they're actually providing their battle shock aura, ankle blight aura, -1 battle shock aura, whatever it may be, you know. So yeah, movement deployment very very important for this detachment. I do recommend playing as many games as you can and just focusing on moving. Especially when you've got like 50 play bearers, there's a lot to move. You need to make sure your auras are right. You need to make sure you're not blocking out other models or other units. Keeping or always remembering where can this unit end up in the next turn or two? If you are charging with a unit, say a ground clean one, can you get him back into your Droning Shroud aura or can you keep him hidden, etc., etc. Now we're going to talk about allocating your battle shots correctly. So, you know, you've got obviously every command phase, you hold some battle shots. You've got the one battle shock in your command phase, and then the minimum of one battle shock in your opponent's command phase. You can use the Plague of Woe stratagem, though, which allows you to essentially cause a second battle shock on an enemy unit that's within 9 inches of a Nurgle unit. So in your opponent's turn, you can cause 2 battle shocks. I've seen people say it's not a very good strat to use. I personally think it's a very important strat in the right situations, right? Sometimes, you know, maybe you're proccing it when you don't need to, but I feel like it's good for redundancy or it's good for trying to maximize additional extra damage. Now, in your opponent's command phase, the reasons you'll be wanting to throw battle shocks on them is quite easily the main reason: stop primary. If you've got an opponent on an objective and they're in the shadows, being able to hit a battle shock on that unit and cause them to fail then means they're not getting the primary, as long as they're not the only unit on the provided they're the only enemy unit on the objective, and provided the objective itself isn't like sticky objective, so they hold it regardless of whether there's a unit with OC on it or not. This is also good if like you've got say 6 plague bearers on an objective for 12 OC, and they've got 2 units equaling 14 OC. Being able to hit one of those units with a battle shock to potentially, you know, stop them holding it, whether that be you hitting the unit with more OC or hitting the unit that has a lesser battle shot at lesser leadership value, whatever it may be. Um, Now this is where Plague of Woes could come in, because you could proc it on both units and then like as redundancy. But because Plague of Woes, you're putting it on your Nurgle unit. If you can put it on a Nurgle unit that can reach one of the units on the objective and maybe another unit, that means you can kind of keep it in the pocket, because you cause the first battle shock from your Melancholic Miasma detachment rule. You wait to see how that goes. If they fail it, sweet, you'll put a battle shock on another unit within 9 inches of the Nurgle unit. If not, then you've got that redundancy. Um, Another good way is to potentially stop or hinder secondary scoring. So let's say your opponent draws cleanse and they've got a unit on an objective and another unit that can get to an objective. Being able to hit one or both of those units will potentially hinder or completely stop them scoring at secondary. And you do your battle shots after they've drawn their cards and decided to recycle or not. So they will be stuck with the card no matter what. Obviously, they can get rid of it at the end of the turn, but it means another turn of no scoring on the primary, which at secondary, which is good. Um, Even if you're not stopping it, you can hinder their turn still, because if they've got, say, two action units that want to be doing an action and then two other units that want to be coming in to move block or charge in and do damage or whatever it may be, if you can cause battle shocks on those units, you're now basically giving your opponent the option of, do you want to just score 0 on cleanse, or cleanse but now not use this unit to move block me or to cause damage or to come and contest an objective or whatever it may be. So again, it's causing your opponent just more mental stress, basically. Another good way to use this battle shock is if you think there's a unit that's going to come surging up to one of your objectives to come and take it, then of course you want to try and boom, OC0 now because you're battle shocks. Now you're not taking this objective. Do you still want to bring this unit over here? Potentially not kill enough of me, just kill a bit of me, but not be able to contest it because now you've got no OC. You know, again, it's just you've got to think ahead when you're using these battle shocks, and if you're not taking fully into the battle shocks, you've got to be doing it even more so because you want to get as much value as you can out of these battle shocks. Now, you can do both in their command phase and your command phase, doing it to prevent stratagem use. For example, if you think your opponent will pull out Epic Challenge to kill, say, the Bowl Pipe or Cankerblight, hitting that unit with a battle shock test will then mean, boom, they're not going to be able to do precision. If your opponent gets Assassinate and the closest unit or the only character they can really get to is a Poxbringer, again, preventing them from killing the Poxbringer with precision, meaning they have to go through the whole unit first, is a good way to do it. If your opponent, if in your command phase, if you want to charge in and you think your opponent's going to like heroically intervene with the unit or potentially do something like counter offensives that interrupt during the fights, being able to hit a unit in your command phase with battle shock, or fever visions for +1 to hit with the battle shock from shooting attacks, or if you've got skull cannons, whatever, um, being able to get demonettes and slash bile pipers in position so you can then cause more battle shocks, just to try and stop potential heroic, but or it's not so much heroic for the start of fight phase battle shocks from demonettes and bile piper, but for the other ones, but counter offensive precision strats that might give them critical hits on better than sixes, sustained +1 to wound, etc., trying to again hinder the usefulness of your opponent. And remember that Battle Shock isn't just to stop OC, but stop stratagem use, stop action use as well. Very important reasons to do Battle Shock. So yeah, I mean, just some of the best ways. I said the best ways. I think the ways you want to kind of be using your Battle Shocks. Always thinking in your head a turn ahead, like in their turn, thinking in your turn, right, where could I Battle Shock, or vice versa, while you're in your turn, moving, thinking, right, in their turn, will I potentially do a double battle shock? What is the situation going to be looking like? I'm probably not going to be able to reach that unit to take it off an objective, but I can get within 9s and then I can cause a battle shock test, etc., etc. And then let's just finish off looking at where you're going to apply damage where needed. So Nurgle isn't like the most damaging of the gods. It's definitely not at all, but very good at chipping down damage and winning that war of attrition, because naturally you're going to be tougher than a lot of your opponents. But what Nurgle is very good at is pointing at one unit and going like die, because you've got Rotigus, who can give +1 damage against an enemy unit for the phase. And you've got Plague Drones, who can give you +1, give you 4 rerolls to wound against that unit for the turn. You've got the strat to give you precision on 5s. Not precision on 5s, sorry, critical hits on 5s, because I was just talking about precision. Critical hits on 5s, which again with Nurgle, you're going to have lethals on pretty much everything, bar beasts. So giving you, auto wounds on 5s. If you've got a Scrivener unit that's sustained and lethal on 5s, that's a very good combination to have. You want to also make sure you're positioning all your buff pieces like Rotigus, like the Font of Spores for +1 AP, because normally you're about AP 1, 2 on your Guo, so getting to 2 on Plague Bearers, 3 on the Guos is really strong. Drones for the reroll, so you're making sure that, when you're positioning your drones, like next turn, what could possibly come at me, where can they move so they can get the shots off to get the reroll wounds. So you want to make sure that you can interact with the enemy unit you kind of need to kill at that time. Again, looking at the board state when you're coming to moving, coming to deploying, whether it's through Deep Strike or whatever, you want to make sure that you're constantly thinking. If you haven't kind of guessed at the moment, this attachment does require a lot of forward thinking, but once you start getting it, it will just become easy once you start getting your reps in, and then it will start being natural. And then you want to remember your positioning for battle shots. We've already kind of mentioned this, but your positioning for battle shot units, staging units up for next turns, or making moves or charges to get you into the right positions. So you're projecting your 9-inch, Nurgle shadow bubble out further, potentially, pushing out the -1 battle shot from a Poxbringer, etc., etc. Having the Bile Piper in a position where he can force units to take battle shots and then cause Clanker Blight damage. So again, I cannot stress enough how much positioning and movement and forward thinking is for this detachment. So if you're going to take anything away from this video, it's get reps in with moving everything, get reps in with positioning, and always think ahead. How is this unit now going to interact with my opponent in the next turn or in the next battle round, whatever. You've always got to kind of be thinking ahead, and that is, in my opinion, the key to this detachment. But also, there is no problem with relying and falling back on your toughness because you are naturally tough. So your opponent will kill you, but it will take them longer to kill you in a lot of cases. So taking advantage of the fact that they're gonna have to overcommit to kill a unit of, say, Plague Bearers at a T6, especially if they are having to pull units out further than they want them to be because of Droning Shroud. Using that to your advantage, it then means you can kind of expose a bit more units because now they're not going to be able to kill all of it. Maybe you can sacrifice a unit to pull some important units out further than your opponent wanted to. So now you can jump on them and trade them. So yeah. Just some advice and some tips on playing Plague Legion. All from my point of view. Of course, there are people that may differ on their opinions of this, but that is just my personal tips and advice when you're coming to running Plague Legion. So I do definitely recommend it if you are very much a player who's not so much concerned on the damage front, but loves to mess around with your opponent's units, your opponent's utility, and likes to play a more of a movement based game than a damage based game. Then definitely Plague Legion is one to look at. It's the reason I love it, and it is very much my favorite detachment by far. Also, Nurgle is just fun. Running Nurgle with loads of Plague Bearers and loads of Duos and Nurglings is very fun to do. So, yeah, hopefully this video can help you out if you're on a Plague Legion journey or you're about to start a Plague Legion journey. Fingers crossed this can provide you something to help you on that journey itself. And maybe help you get a few more wins, or even just help you kind of understand the detachment a little bit more. So, thank you for tuning in, and we will catch you all in the next one.